It wasn't just concrete. It was pain. A wall that tore families apart overnight. Where a handshake turned into a goodbye. Where hope was locked behind bricks. And love became a crime. This is the story of the Berlin Wall. The wall that touched hearts. This is Sun Gurru, where history breathes, emotions speak, and untold stories touch your soul. From forgotten wars to broken hearts. From rising empires to fallen walls. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that half your city is gone. Not by war, not by fire, but by a wall. A wall that slashes through streets, parks, even homes, dividing families, friends, entire lives overnight. Your street, now a dead end. Your neighbor, suddenly a stranger. On one side, freedom, color, noise. On the other, silence, fear, control. People watched loved ones vanish behind concrete. Hope turned into whispers. This isn't fiction. This was Berlin. A city cut in half by fear, by force, by history. The world thought the war was over. That peace had finally arrived. The guns went silent. But the fear, it only grew louder. The smoke of World War II hadn't even cleared before a new enemy emerged. Invisible, yet everywhere. Two superpowers, locked in a battle of ideologies. East versus West. Freedom versus control. The bombs had stopped falling, but shadows replaced fire. Mistrust replaced diplomacy. The front lines were no longer trenches. They were borders, spies, and silent threats. This wasn't peace. It was a different kind of war. The Cold War. Born from victory, raised in suspicion. One flag torn in two. One nation split by fear. In the heart of Europe, Germany became a battlefield, not of bombs or bullets, but of ideologies. Capitalism on one side, communism on the other. A nation once united, now a pawn in a global power struggle. Streets once walked freely became guarded borders. Families separated not by distance, but by doctrine. Freedom became a privilege, not a right. Hope lived in whispers, while surveillance ruled daily life. This was more than division. This was Germany, a land caught between worlds, between past and future, between unity and control, a land divided by design. They risked it all, crawling through hand-dug tunnels, hiding in car trunks, jumping from apartment windows, straddling the wall. All for one thing, freedom. In a city split by concrete and fear, every escape was a silent rebellion, a race against searchlights, guard dogs, machine guns, mothers clutching children, lovers separated by politics, students, workers, ordinary people, facing extraordinary danger. Some made it across and felt the first breath of freedom. Others weren't so lucky, their sacrifice buried in shadows. But every attempt sent a message. Hope cannot be walled in. This is their story. This is the fight for dignity. This is the story of their escape to freedom. The war had ended, but Stalin wasn't done. Victory was just the beginning of another battle. Tanks rolled in. Borders grew sharper. Freedom faded behind checkpoints and barbed wire. Dissent was dangerous. Whispers could cost lives. Every street in Berlin breathed tension, because Soviet pressure wasn't just political. It was deeply personal. Families watched as neighbors vanished overnight. Ideas became threats. Hope turned into silence. This was a new kind of control, not with bombs, but with fear, and it spread, brick by brick, across Eastern Europe. The Cold War was no longer cold. It was simmering, rising, and the Iron Fist, it was tightening its grip. This was just the beginning. What began as simple barbed wire, a fragile, razor-sharp barrier barely noticed at first, slowly grew into towering walls of cold, unforgiving concrete. A city once connected by streets and stories, now shattered, fractured into two, divided not just by fences, but by fear, suspicion, and silence. Neighbors turned strangers, families torn apart by invisible lines, from rusty wire to massive stone walls. This was the price paid for a broken world, a world scarred by ideology and mistrust. Every brick tells a story of loss. Every shadow hides a memory of hope. This is the story of how a city was split, from barbed wire to concrete. Imagine waking up, trapped inside your own city. The streets you once knew like the back of your hand have become invisible barriers. lines on a map you can no longer cross, the cafes where you shared laughter with friends, now empty or on the other side of a guarded border. Neighbors you once greeted with smiles have become strangers, or worse, watchers. Freedom feels like a distant dream, miles away and unreachable. But the walls, they're right outside your door. Cold, unyielding, and unforgiving. This is what it means to be trapped in your own city. In the West, lights flickered with promise, bustling streets, open doors, and whispered dreams of tomorrow. Shops full of color, laughter in the air, a pulse of freedom beating in every corner. But just beyond the wall, the East grew quiet. The hum of life dulled into silence. Shadows stretched longer with each passing day, and voices, once bold, were hushed by fear. Children played under watchful eyes. Dreams were measured, controlled, or simply erased. A city that once breathed as one, now lived two separate lives. One fueled by opportunity, the other stifled by oppression. This was Berlin, a city divided, where one side shines and the other slowly fades away. The wall wasn't just bricks and concrete. It was a line etched in blood and fear, a symbol of division, yes, but also of danger. It was guarded day and night by guns, silent, cold sentinels, not pointed at invaders, but at ordinary people, at brothers, sisters, neighbors, as if freedom itself were a threat. Soldiers stood on the edge of humanity, fingers on triggers, orders clear. Shoot to kill if anyone dared to dream too loudly or run too far. One wrong step, a glance too bold, a pause too long, could be your last. The wall didn't just slice a city in two. It turned homes into battlefields, families into targets, and hope into a high-stakes gamble. Freedom, just a few meters away, visible but unreachable. Escape wasn't rebellion. It was survival. It was desperation wrapped in courage. Because this wasn't just a wall. It was a border defended with bullets. And this was the deadly reality of guns on the wall. The wall rose high, and the world fell silent. Streets were split, families tore apart, and the city, once full of life, was wrapped in shadows. But even in the darkest nights, a spark refused to die. Secret messages tucked into coat sleeves, whispers passed between cracks in the wall, silent prayers sent up through barbed wire. They couldn't march, couldn't speak, but they dreamed of reunion, of light, of freedom. Behind every guarded gate, behind every locked door, someone still believed. Because even when the world forgets you, even when fear fills the air, there is something no wall can ever hold back. Hope, even behind cold concrete. There was hope in the dark. They try to build walls to keep dreams in, but dreams don't obey borders. They rise, over fences, through silence, beyond the reach of fear. For every wall of concrete, there was a heart that refused to break. For every coil of barbed wire, a mind that still imagined freedom. Freedom to speak, to live, to love, to be. They watched the skies, eyes full of longing, souls echoing with a quiet question. What if the world beyond that wall wasn't an enemy, but a promise? They dreamed of a life where no one dictated their path, where footsteps weren't tracked, and voices weren't silenced. Because hope doesn't stop at a checkpoint, because spirit doesn't kneel to fear, and because those who dare to dream always look up, not down. The sky was never divided. No soldier could guard the clouds. No regime could own the wind. And in the end, those who believed the sky was the limit proved it, not with violence, but with vision, not with hate, but with hope. Because beyond every wall, above every barrier, there's always sky, and the sky is the limit. Freedom isn't free. It's bought with tears, with silence, with sacrifice. It's carved into the cold nights of waiting, etched into every unanswered letter, and whispered through final goodbyes. Families torn apart, fathers left behind, mothers holding on to hope like a lifeline, children growing up on the wrong side of a wall, wondering why love had a border. Lives vanished in the shadows, not forgotten but missing, echoes in the stillness of prison cells, names spoken only in hushed tones, all for a glimpse of the other side, a glimpse of freedom. Every escape wasn't just a risk. It was a declaration, a decision to defy fear, to challenge injustice, to believe that life was meant for more than just survival. Every step toward freedom left behind footprints of blood and courage. Every breath taken outside the wall was earned through pain, and every name we remember today was once a soul who dared to dream. Because behind every victory, there's a price, a deep human cost, measured not in medals, but in missing faces, empty chairs, and stories cut short. This is the cost of freedom. He stood at the wall, eyes full of dreams, heart full of hope. A world waited just beyond the cold concrete. Laughter, light, freedom, all of it so close he could almost touch it. But the border stayed closed. No door opened. No path appeared. He waited. He wished. He whispered promises to the sky, imagining what life might be like on the other side. Days turned to months, months to years, while the world changed, while walls rose and fell elsewhere. But not here. His dreams didn't fade. They flickered. They fought. But the wall stood taller than his hope could climb. A silent prisoner of a divided world. He watched friends disappear into history, families reunite without him, and a future he imagined slip further away. He never crossed. He never escaped. No spotlight. No headline. Just a boy waiting. This is the story of the boy who never crossed. A story of hope held back, of a spirit fenced in, and a life paused forever. At the edge of freedom, they ran toward the wall, chasing freedom with fearless hearts, driven by hope, by desperation, by dreams too strong to ignore. They weren't soldiers. They were students, parents, sisters, sons, each with a reason to run, each with everything to lose. But on the other side, bullets waited, cold, unforgiving, trained not on invaders, but on those who dare to dream. When courage met cruelty, the silence shattered. The air was thick with tension, with sirens, with screams, with the sharp crack of defiance met by gunfire. Some soared beyond the barriers, touching freedom's edge with trembling hands, and others fell, names lost to history, but never forgotten. This was not just an escape. It was a stand, a battlefield of wills, where hope clashed with harsh reality, and the price of belief was blood. This is the story of courage meeting cruelty, a moment etched in time, where bravery was tested, and the cost of freedom was written in sacrifice. One voice shouted, then hundreds followed. What began as a whisper of rebellion rose into a thunder of unity. Fists raised high, hearts burning with defiance. They stood tall against the wall of fear, the wall that had kept them silent, broken, afraid, but not anymore. No more silence, no more chains, no more living in the shadows of power and oppression. Their footsteps pounded the pavement like drums of war. Their chants pierced the cold morning air. Each voice added strength to the next. Not just a protest, but a promise. We will be heard. Their courage echoed through the streets, shaking the cold concrete, cracking the mask of control. Eyes opened. The world listened. That day, something shifted. The ground beneath the regime trembled. This was more than anger. This was unity. A roar of hope and resistance, rising from generations of silence. This was the moment everything changed, because this was when the protest began. They had no weapons, only words, no army behind them, just unity, raw, unshakable, human unity. But their voices, they grew louder, stronger, more unstoppable with each passing breath. They rose above the silence, above the fear, above the threats that try to quiet them. Through alleyways and avenues, their voices echoed, in songs, in chants, in defiant whispers that refused to fade. With every shout, every cry, every trembling word of hope, the wall that once divided not just land, but souls and dreams, began to crack, not from force, not for violence, but from the sound of togetherness, the kind of sound that shakes foundations, that rattles injustice, that awakens even the coldest corners of power. Because when people rise together, when they speak with courage, with truth, with one shared breath, no barrier is too strong, no fortress too tall, no silence can last forever. Voices can break walls, and in that sound, in that human symphony of resistance, freedom always finds its way. Tanks rolled in, gates locked shut, but the cameras didn't blink, not once. Behind every scream, every protest, every desperate cry, Eyes across the globe were fixed on one place, watching in real time as history unfolded on cracked pavement and tear-streaked faces. Every move counted, every step forward, every shout of defiance, every bullet that pierced the silence. It was all captured, not forgotten, seen by millions, heard by millions, felt by millions. The world was watching, and in that gaze, truth found light. No longer could silence hide the violence. No longer could fear suppress the fight for freedom. Because when the world watches, when even the smallest voice is heard by the loudest corners of power, injustice trembles, and courage grows louder, louder than sirens, louder than lies. Silence was no longer an option. And in that moment, when fear met visibility and truth stood exposed, everything changed. Crowds gathered, hands trembling, hearts racing with hope and fear. Whispers turned into shouts as the impossible began to feel real. The air was electric, thick with anticipation, memory, and the weight of decades. Then, the unthinkable happened. A wall that had stood for so long, a barrier of concrete, wire, and silence, a symbol of division, of lost dreams and stolen time, finally began to crumble. Piece by piece, brick by brick, it came down, not with bombs or bullets, but with bare hands and beating hearts. Tears turned into cheers. Fear gave way to joy, and strangers, separated for years, became family in an instant. They climbed it. They chipped away at it. They danced on its rubble, under a sky that finally felt free. November 9th, 1989. The night freedom broke through cold concrete, and a city, once split in two, began to heal as one. This wasn't just the fall of a wall. It was the fall of fear, and the rise of a new era. An era where hope was no longer whispered, but shouted loud for the world to hear. For years, a cold wall stood between them. Not just concrete and barbed wire, but silence, distance, time. No letters, no voices, no touch to bridge the aching void. Families were torn apart. Friends faded into memories. Hearts endured in quiet suffering, hoping for a day that might never come. But then it happened. A day unlike any other. The wall cracked, and through the dust and rubble, arms reached out, trembling, searching, remembering. They found each other, hands locked, eyes met across decades of pain. And in that moment, two souls, once divided, became one again. Tears fell freely. Joy surged like never before. And for a heartbeat, history itself held its breath. Because that first hug wasn't just an embrace. It was the sound of freedom, the warmth of healing, a promise that no wall, no matter how high, how strong, could ever truly keep love apart. This was the moment when love broke through concrete. They came with hammers, not hate. With every powerful strike, concrete crumbled, and so did decades of pain and silence. Tears rolled down faces, mixing with sweat and burning hope, each blow a shout against the years of division. Cheers erupted, echoing through the night air, loud enough to shake the very ground beneath their feet. That wall didn't just break, it shattered the weight of history, toppling walls built on fear, built on separation, built on silence. And as the rubble fell, in its place rose something stronger, a promise of unity, a rebirth of a city, and a world finally ready to heal together. This was more than just a moment. It was the sound of freedom, raw, unstoppable, alive, a roar that would never be silenced again. Once divided by fear and towering concrete walls, Berlin now stands tall, a shining symbol of unity, hope, and resilience. The streets that were once split by division now overflow with the laughter of children, the hum of everyday life, and the steady footsteps of those who are building a future together, brick by brick. East and West, once separated by more than just distance, now walk hand in hand, sharing stories, dreams, and endless possibilities. The monuments and remnants of the past remind us of pain and struggle, but also of the strength it takes to overcome. This city, once broken and torn apart, has healed and blossomed into something beautiful, a living proof that even the deepest divides can be bridged by courage and unity. This is Berlin today, vibrant, free, full of life, and forever a testament to the power of coming together. The wall may be gone now, its cold concrete rubble scattered and slowly dusted away by time. But its scars still whisper through the streets, echoing in the hearts and minds of those who lived through it, and those who carry its memory. It reminds us how fear can build barriers, walls that separate families, divide friends, and fracture entire nations. But more importantly, it teaches us about the power of courage and hope, forces strong enough to break those barriers down, piece by piece, brick by brick. Today, the wall no longer stands as a divider or a prison. Instead, it stands as a powerful mirror, reflecting our past mistakes and warning us about the dangers of division. It is a lesson carved deep in stone and memory, so that we never forget the price of fear, and so we never build walls like this again. The wall lives on, not as a symbol of separation or hatred, but as a call to unity, to understanding, and to the strength we find when we come together. Some walls aren't made of bricks or concrete. They don't tower above cities or cast long shadows across borders. They're invisible, built from fear, from doubt, from pain that no one else can see. These walls can be just as strong, just as trapping. They can hold you back, silence your voice, and keep your dreams locked in the dark corners of your mind. But here's the truth. You don't need a hammer or a wrecking ball or even permission to tear them down. What you need is courage. Courage to sit with your fear and not run. Courage to question the doubt that's kept you small. Courage to look your pain in the eye and say, "You don't define me." Break the wall inside you, not with force, but with belief. And from that rubble, a stronger, braver version of you will rise. One that finally sees the sky without limits and knows you are always free to begin with.